your writing deserves to be read. And we are going to do everything we can to get it to an audience that will love it as much as you do.
Greetings, and welcome to the Creative Writing Wizard podcast. Today is a bit different on the podcast as I am joined by CEO and founder of StoryForge, Sabrina Rucker. Welcome to the podcast, Sabrina. For those listening in who may not know you, can you tell us a little bit about yourself?
So I'm Sabrina Rucker, and I am the CEO and founder of StoryForge, which is a website basically for helping new writers get published. Not just new writers, but any writer. I'm a writer myself, and it was founded out of a sense of frustration with the current state of the publishing industry. So it's very much by authors for authors.
Indeed, yeah, and I think that's one of the reasons why I wanted to have you on the podcast is I've watched a few of your conversations online through your own podcast, and there's a few little speeches that you've done trying to talk about StoryForge. But it's interesting to hear about how you took your personal experience as a writer and then kind of used that as fuel to start StoryForge. So for those who may not be as familiar with your background, can you talk a little bit about how you started working as a writer? And I believe it was a graphic novel that you were working on. And then you tried to traditionally publish, which is a route that many of writers take. But then through that process, kind of, walking us through how that happened and how that led to the eventual forming of StoryForge.
Mm-hmm. So, the basic story is one that most people who are listening will probably resonate with. I had a story that I wanted to get published, and I tried, and I failed. What the more detailed background is that the story I was trying to get published was actually an adaptation of my very favorite book. It's called Villains by Necessity by E. Forward. And I loved that book throughout middle and high school and thought this would be an amazing graphic novel, like an amazing comic book. It has all these different, color magic and light and dark themes, so, it would be ideal for putting into artwork. And so I actually reached out to the author herself, E. Forward, and said, I love your book. I'm a super fan. I want to try and bring this back into the publishing space because it'd been out of print for quite some time. And she was like, yeah, sure, go for it. You can definitely give it a try. So I spent the next 2 years working out a script and finding an artist and getting all the rights and everything I would need to make this happen. And then I started querying, and I really, really thought that writing all of that out and doing all the work to find all those people would be the hardest part, and I quickly found that the publishing process was so tangled and twisted that I was not able to make any progress. And not only that, but it didn't feel like there was any meaningful steps forward that I was making. I just kept hitting a wall again and again, and it never felt like it was ever worth it. I had gained something at least from that interaction. So at the 19th rejection, that's when I kind of snapped. And I find that when I tell that number to writers, they often are like, oh, well, 19's not too many, because the conventional wisdom is try 100 times before you give up, right? But when I talk to, this surprised me, when I talk to other people who are not in this world, 19 is an absurd number to them. They're like, 19 times that you tried and you didn't get in? I think a lot of people think that, maybe 3 applications and eventually someone will pick you up, but that's really not the way the system is set up.
Yeah, it's interesting. Definitely has been a learning experience for me too, in that I kind of equated it to, in my mind, of it's just like applying to a job. You put out a few applications, you hear a few back, you get some interviews, and then there you go. You get agented, you get into the publishing industry, and then that's kind of that's history at that point. But as you say, 100 is kind of like the gold standard of if you try 100 times, you're maybe likely to get an agent. But even then, it's a tough industry. But I like what you've done here is you've taken that though, and then you've kind of turned it into but how can I turn around and help other writers, which I think is super cool. Because like there's a lot of platforms out there trying to help writers in one way or another, but you're coming from a very personal experience of the industry is hard, and it doesn't necessarily need to be, and it's also very complicated. So then, how did that, that drive then lead to the formation of StoryForge? Like, how did you say, okay, I hit 19, I snapped, and then StoryForge suddenly is existing? Can you walk us through that a little bit?
Yeah, well, I mean, the original idea for StoryForge looked a lot different than what it is today. The original idea was kind of like a common application for literary agents, so that you could find a bunch of them very easily. You would only submit like one, query, and then that one, gold standard query could go out to a bunch of different people. The problem was that I quickly found out there was really no benefit to a literary agent to be part of that. Like, all the benefit would be towards the writers, who wouldn't have to work as hard. But the agents have all those different specifications for very specific reasons. Like, they're part of smaller presses, or they really hate dealing with this particular kind of submission, or they're trying to weed out people by giving arbitrary extra things to see how well they can listen. Like, the common application idea, especially when I started floating it among some other literary agents in the world of publishing now, it was not popular or well received at all. So then we kind of hit a snag. I was going, is this even worth pursuing? I'm not sure. But I realized that in the act of trying to fix this problem, I really couldn't let the idea go, that there had to be a better way. And once I realized that I just couldn't leave it be, like I would always be trying to solve this, even if I didn't do anything about it, I was like, well, I might as well just, let's see how far this can go.
Yeah, well, and it's certainly gone pretty far as I can see. I recently saw an update that you're coming out with like a pretty substantial refresh of the interface and whatnot. I guess for those of who are watching this and haven't heard of StoryForge before, what exactly is it now, and how does it help writers in today's market?
Right now, it is mostly focused on, it's kind of like a fan fiction site that's focused on editing. That's what it is right this second. So you can put your work in progress on there. You can get all sorts of friends. You can find them in circles, like writer circles, or you can just put it out in the big wide world of StoryForge. And when people are reading your work, they can do things such as, click into particular paragraphs or leave comments on your work. They can react to it in various capacities. Like, it's really a community-based platform, and the idea is kind of crowdsourcing a lot of the editing that you would normally get from a publisher. So we really, really focus on like beta and alpha reading on the site. What I am excited for it to become is more of an alternative to the way that publishing works now. So traditional publishing, as we know, it's free, but it's very exclusive. It's very time consuming. It's very hard to get into. Self-publishing is quite expensive, but it is very accessible to anyone, as long as they can afford it. The idea with StoryForge is to be a third thing, something that is free and accessible to everyone. And basically the only thing that you are paying with is your time and the time it takes to edit something into a really quality piece of fiction.
Yeah, and I like that. It's like taking that edge of, there should be something that makes this easier. Like, this shouldn't be as complicated as it is, and then trying to target how you can help in that area. I've uploaded a few of my stories there, and I'll say it's really interesting to see people give feedback to me. One of my flash fictions I put up there, people pointed out stuff that I wouldn't have necessarily thought about, and it felt like it was a lot, I don't know how to say it, but it was a lot safer to put it up there than let's say, some other places that I've tried in the past, and a lot more of a, how do I say, positive environment. Because as I'm sure you're well aware, social media can be a wide variety of feedback systems and types of vibes that you'll get. But the feedback I got was like super supportive, and like if there was any like critiques, it was like constructive criticism, which I thought was pretty neat. But you talk about like adding a third option. You also are pushing out into publishing with StoryForge yourself, with the upcoming anthology that you're working on. And you've collected authors from a variety of different stories that have submitted to your platform. Can you talk about how the anthology came about and how that ties into your kind of overall mission of adding that third lane option for publishing?
So, like I said, right now the StoryForge site is more about, collecting feedback and being like a place to get early stage readers. And the goal has always been to provide another easier path to publishing. But about a year and a half in, we realized that in our quest to build the perfect alternative, we hadn't actually delivered on the promise that we were making. So the anthology is us kind of dipping our toes in the water, figuring out, all right, how does this whole publishing thing work? Let's get it all together by highlighting some of the amazing stories and writers that are already on the site. And let's figure it out so that when our legendary path is ready, and that's what we've been calling our mainstream version, we'll be able to handle as many people as are interested without, crumbling under the pressure. So that's how it came about. And I'm actually really excited. I just saw the advanced reader copy, the proof version of the anthology. It's looking beautiful, and it's going to be ready in just a couple of weeks, probably sooner. So,
can you talk a little bit about what? And I guess feel free to say if it's too early or not, or if it's hush hush. But can you talk a little bit about what that third lane might look like in terms of, let's say, for example, right now you can write anything from like microfiction to flash fiction to short stories to like full-length novels using StoryForge. How does that work to then take that and publish it in some sense that people can then consume it?
And I will add before I clarify that all of these details are still being worked out, so some of my answers might not apply forever and all time. So I'll give you what I can give you right now, which is that we are right now trying to figure out, the original goal was always like a book. We were thinking, this is for publishing books, but then, like you said, a lot of other shorter but excellent work has appeared on the platform, to the point that it doesn't really make sense to publish like a book when the book only has 3 poems in it, So the recent development that has kind of added some challenges but also will make it much cooler in the legendary path is having a second option where, if your work is shorter, it can be part of a collection like the anthology. So trying to figure out right now what that looks like in the future so that it can be as easy as possible for all the people who have wonderful short works. One of the things we've been thinking about is grouping like genres together. So perhaps you have a short story that's horror oriented. Well, maybe we put you in a group of other horror writers, and then we work hard to make that anthology into its own really cool, separate marketable thing. Maybe if you are a poet and you have 50 different poems and you'd like them all in one place, well, perhaps we can have a way for all 50 to be collected into a single volume that is, your poetry book. These are the kinds of things we're thinking about right now. And the the path to publishing is well defined for like a, over 100,000 word novel. And it's only since starting the actual anthology work that we realized how many different shades of gray there are in kinds of things that people would like to publish.
Indeed. Yeah. And it's an interesting point that I saw an agent make on threads about how there's a difference between like expectations from publishers and like expectations from readers, which was interesting for me to think about because as a writer, it's not really something that I think about of how many thousands of words is a normal story, quote unquote. And the answer is technically there is no normal. There is just maybe some expectations. So in what they talked about of how it was like, as a self-publish or indie, you could technically do whatever you want. Maybe there's some readers that expect one thing or another, but when it comes to traditional, there's kind of like guidelines in terms of like how many thousands of words is it kind of expected, and if it's below that or above that, then you start to see like yellow flags, red flags from agents and publishers, which to me was very fascinating. So I guess the question to you though is, as you're approaching this, you're kind of in the middle. I don't know if I want to position you in the middle, but in the sense of where you are learning from, the challenges of like traditional publishing, as well as the benefits from self-publishing, but then differentiating yourself from both. So how are you approaching that aspect of like, how can people identify you within those kind of lenses, I guess?
That's a good question, and I'm trying to figure out where to start with answering it. I think one clear differentiation between us and traditional publisher is that it's going to be very rare that we at StoryForge will reject something outright. The general philosophy of the company and of like the entire team really is that your writing deserves to be read, and we are going to do everything we can to get it to an audience that will love it as much as you do. So the main difference between us and a traditional publisher is there's not often, and I say often because there was a little bit of this for the anthology. We got 80 submissions. We had to figure out how to sort through them so it wasn't a monster book. But there's not often going to be like a room full of people going, that looks marketable. Okay, that's what we'll choose, I think StoryForge, in the way it's set up, it encourages risk-taking a lot more than a traditional publisher would. We're not necessarily looking for the work that is going to be the safest or the most predictable. We're looking for genre breaking or unusual or maybe just authentic, stories that will really mean something to folks. And with the way that we're set up as kind of a sort of gamified website, we can afford to take those kinds of risks in a way that a traditional publisher cannot. As opposed to self-publishing, the biggest difference is really that we are not going to charge for any part of the process. There are ways to spend money on StoryForge, but it is a core value of the team that you won't have to pay to win. There's no way that we have built in that spending money on the site will get you published faster or will change the quality of feedback that you're getting or anything like that.
I like how you've gone about it of you have like a little room that you get to design and have your little cat that you can give all outfits, and it's a fun way to have that gamification aspect of things to encourage you to write and to get feedback and to give feedback, or even to help support StoryForge. But it's done in a way, like you say, is not a pay to win strategy. It's a additional like layer of customization that just makes your experience a little different. So I dig that. I guess one of the things though that I liked that also differentiates StoryForge, and maybe you can talk a bit about how you came about this mentality, is the StoryForge's stance on AI, specifically on the feeding data into AI models and AI generation. A lot of platforms nowadays, whether people know it or not, will take your data and feed it into some form of AI algorithm and machine learning model, and then pump that out into some other product that they have. But with StoryForge, you're very much against that. And you've said that in several places on your site. Can you talk a bit about your experience in terms of how the industry is shifting with platforms' perspective as well as the writer's perspective when it comes to AI and AI generation?
Mm-hmm. I think that a reason that a lot of people in the industry have been adopting AI is that from a platform perspective, it does make a lot of sense to take this like money saving, alternative. And you can argue whether or not it's efficient or not, but the truth is that the adoption of AI tools, it is something that can speed up the process of a lot of different things that are very challenging to do in a small business. But one of the things that we have realized from listening to our users and from the writers that we have on the team is that it is very much not something that any of the writers that we have or know are comfortable with. Generative AI specifically, and the theft of work to train it is something that worries a lot of our users. And so putting them first is really the reason behind our very hard stance against generative AI. We want StoryForge to be a safe place, and if that means making things harder for ourselves by not adopting these tools, by taking a bunch of steps to keep the work from being scanned, then that's what we're going to do. Like I said, we really are by writers for writers. It has made some things a little bit more challenging from the business perspective, but I would want anyone listening to know that we're serious. We're for the writers. It is making our life considerably harder, but we are so on your side.
Yeah, and it's an interesting point you make of how, from a business perspective, AI has a potential to make you a lot of money, or at least make things easier. So therefore, you wouldn't need as many, say, human workers or human hours to get a thing done. And so, because you're able to do things faster and easier, that means in business terms cheaper, which for businesses is usually, kind of the main thing that you're going for is making a business. You want to have profit. But it's really interesting that you mentioned that you're taking the hard stance against it, and even recognizing that by doing so, you're making your own life more difficult, but because it's for a good reason. And so I really dig that. I guess as you've been talking with others in the publishing industry, from agents and editors and potentially even other publishers, what's the feedback that you're getting in terms of what you're doing, and even some of the feedback that you've been receiving from writers who've been using your platform?
The idea of a third path seems to really excite a lot of people. The one thing that I've seen from the beginning is that as soon as I start talking about the problems inherent in publishing as it exists today, I'm getting a lot of yes, and, this person says their dad tried to publish and having the same thing. This person tells me that they've been wanting to write a children's book for forever but couldn't figure out where to start once they'd written it. This person is telling me that they actually co-wrote something with their sibling and they've been trying to get it published. There's so many people out there who have a story in them that they haven't been able to share with the world, and the problems that caused me to found StoryForge are very much known and causing other people lots of frustration. And so that's the number one thing. As soon as I start talking about what I'm seeing and why it's not working, I get lots of, yes, it's not working. Wait, you have a solution?
I guess a question of curiosity is, and I mean, I imagine that you're extremely busy with all the things that are going on. Have you ever gone back to the story that you're writing and try to get it across the finish line?
So I can say that I haven't done much in the way of officially publishing or trying to get it across the finish line, as you say. But I can tell you that yesterday I did communicate with the author herself. We're still in touch. I was kind of trying to decompress from a work day, and I drew some fan art from her book, and I sent it her way and was like, hey, haven't been working on the actual publication, but I'm still thinking of you. Have some fan art. And she sent back like, oh my gosh, it's wonderful to hear from you. I love getting anything that you send my way. So, there's still a wonderful relationship that we have, and I have not given up on it. I happen to be trying to solve everyone else's problem before my own. But just because it's been set down does not mean it's been abandoned.
Yeah, I feel like there's a nugget of wisdom in there of like the path to publishing and the path to finishing your story. It only stops when you give up. Like as long as you hold on to that idea, you can carry it on and finish your story and share it with people. And I think StoryForge, it sounds like, is going to help a lot of writers who don't really know like what to do with their story, but they still want to share it. And it sounds really interesting in terms of what potential is there for what's coming down the way. I guess as coming out of a writer yourself, and the experience that you've had with StoryForge and working in the industry the last little bit here, what would you say is any advice or any tips that you'd give to writers who are currently going through trying to figure out how to write their story or how to get their story to readers? What have you learned from that perspective?
Well, the easy answer is community and, finding people that you can ask questions of. But I know that that's kind of hard for a lot of people to find, is a writing group. I know in the Twin Cities, I'm very lucky. There's a whole huge, indie publishing scene, which means that there's a lot of people to reach out to and ask. And I know that it can feel quite isolating if you're, a writing, it's quite an isolating hobby. So it can feel like there's not very many people to reach out. In that case, I would suggest indie presses. I was kind of against looking at really small publishers when I started out, because I thought I'm going to go for Dark Horse Comics and Image Comics. It's going to be really big. It's going to be in all the Barnes & Noble stores. But if I were doing it from the beginning now, StoryForge aside, if I were doing it from the beginning now, I would definitely have approached a huge collection of independent publishers and tried to find a match based on, what their vibe was and whether I thought they could help me make the story as awesome as it could be. I think that independent presses often get overlooked because they don't seem as glamorous as other places, but in my experience, indie publishers and small presses tend to be the advocates that you want to have in the publishing space. They're not going to be as distractible. They're not going to be as impersonal. They're going to be, if you're accepted by a small press, they're going to be rooting for you. They're going to be trying to get you in local bookstores and with nearby library events and all these different things. And the quality of feedback is often as good as or better than the big publisher spaces that you would be going to in an alternative way. So I would definitely recommend indie press and publishers, and they will also be able to help you find community as well.
Yeah, that's a good point. I think a lot of people, especially newer writers and aspiring authors, when they look at the options before them, they tend to see two major camps. They see the traditional publishing, which is like the big five, if let's say from a novel perspective. But then other than that, people assume that the only other option is to self-publish, which a lot of people also include in the indie publishing kind of label. But there is that middle ground of where it's not a big five and it's not self-publish, but it's something that is maybe smaller press or an indie press, where they have a smaller group of authors. But as you say, there are benefits to having someone who only has 5 to maybe 20 authors that are on their portfolio. And so, yeah, I definitely recommend people looking for places like that and kind of like expanding their horizons in terms of what is possible. I've had the opportunity to talk to a number of indie presses and small publishers with the work that I've been doing with the Indie Release Radar. And it's so cool to learn about all these often are very passionate writers themselves and who have tried self-publishing and found, wow, this is really challenging to get the book out there. I want to help other people. And so in the same light is like, I feel like StoryForge is leaning in that direction. And I'm definitely rooting for you guys, because rooting for a fellow indie in the space, but also pretty curious to see about where he takes StoryForge. It's already grown quite a lot over the last year and a bit. And I'm curious to see where things go.
Yeah, me too.
Indeed. So yeah, I guess is there anything that you feel like people would want to know about StoryForge that maybe they wouldn't, or something that you'd want to highlight to the writers or readers who might be looking on?
One thing that I would like folks to know is that Glenn mentioned a big new release that's coming. That's like the tip of the iceberg. The way that things have ended up being on development is that we have about like 5 or 6 major new releases that are coming in the next like half a year. So the big 2.0 expansion will make everything so much better. It'll be way more accessible. There'll be way more cool. There's like confetti options that you can try and everything, but like that's the tip of the iceberg. Like after 2.0, there are other things that I can't quite talk about yet that are coming down the pipeline. But if you get on StoryForge now, you'll be in the lovely position of like seeing all the wonderful things coming one after another, after another, after another. Okay, it won't feel stagnant at all.
That's awesome. Yeah, I'm being on the platform myself, I'm definitely excited. I saw a sneak peek shared from your socials, and some of the features that you're adding are pretty snazzy. So I'm looking forward to that. I guess what's a good place for people to find out more about StoryForge, either on the web or on socials?
StoryForge.com is the best place. You can also follow us. I think we have a very, very active Threads account. That'd be _StoryForge, I believe. And it's the same tag on Instagram. We also have a podcast on YouTube, also _StoryForge. And yeah, you can find us in many places. Keep an eye out around October and November, because we'll be having a lot of Preptober and then 30K and 30 days events for the big November writing month. So we'll be doing some special stuff on StoryForge there. And yeah.
Awesome. That sounds great. So I'll leave links in the description below for people to check out. Definitely, as I say, if you're a writer, check it out. It's free, it's easy, and you'll be surprised at some of the feedback that you'll get and how easy it is to connect to other people. Which I'll say, having been on socials for over a year and a half, has taken a good deal of time to try and find the right people to have input into my story. So I'm looking forward to seeing how StoryForge grows over the next few years. And I appreciate you taking some time to talk to me today.
Yeah, likewise. This has been wonderful.